2021 Center for Poetry and Poetics reading, and welcome to you all, or welcome back. So we hoped this time last year that the spring series, would happen in real life by now, but obviously it's got its pros and cons, because if all this was happening in real life now, we wouldn't have been able to meet with poets like, for example, tonight, for example, Bagoo. So it's actually turned out pretty luckily that the pandemic is not that the pandemic is still going on, but the fact that we are sort of forced back onto the online readings. So a really warm and huge welcome to 5 authors, 5 writers tonight. And the reading order will be, we're going to kick off with Mary Jane Chan, who is going to be our first reader. Bagoo is going to be our second reader, and Sam Walton is going to be reading as the last poet in the first half. We're not going to have huge break, and it's not even correct for me to say halves. But anyway, we're going to have like a 2 to 3 minute break in between the 2 parts of the evening, and then in the second half we're going to have Amy Diaz to read, and we're gonna round up the evening beautifully with Tiffany Atkinson. So the way I'm going to welcome to all of you who've come tonight. Can you just confirm that you can hear me, because I can hear a strange sort of noise in the background. I will assume that you can from the silence. So another big warm welcome to those who have come back as our audience and friends and colleagues and students, and also if this is your first time with us and the Center for Poetry and Poetics, then a huge welcome to you as well, and thank you for being here. So I'm just going to we'll have time to announce readings, sort of future readings, which will take place within the Center for Poetry and Poetics, but also we will have the opportunity to ask you to announce anything or any events that you would like to draw our attention to. I will also make some announcements about the spring's schedule towards the end of the reading, if I can still speak. So let me introduce the first poets for tonight. Really pleased to say that Mary Jane Chan has agreed, and also all the 5 authors really generously and kind-heartedly agreed to read for the spring event, for this particular spring event. And I have to put the emphasis on the generosity, which I hope you know what I'm referring to. So Mary Jane Chan is the author of Flesh, which was published by Faber in 2019. It's a collection that won the Costa Book Award for Poetry, and also was shortlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize and the Seamus Heaney Center First Collection Poetry Prize. Mary Jane Chan won the 2018 Geoffrey Dearmer Prize, and also was shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Best Single Poem twice, in fact, and received the Eric Gregory Award also in 2019. In spring 2020, Mary Jane was guest co-editor at the Poetry Review. Chan was born and raised in Hong Kong, and currently is senior lecturer in creative writing poetry at Oxford Brookes University, but lives in London, so she's going to be our first reader. After Mary Jane, Andre Bagoo is going to read. As I said informally to Andre, a really warm welcome to Andre, who is reading or giving us this reading from Trinidad, who is a Trinidadian poet and writer, and the author of 4 books of poems, 4 poetry collections: Chick Vessels, Burn, which came out by Shearsman, Pitch Lake, and The City of Dreadful Night. If I'm right, they all the others came out by poetry has appeared in various journals, for example, the Boston Review, St. Petersburg Review, the Poetry Review, Caribbean Review of Books, Draconian Switch, and various other places, which, Andre, you've shied away from, but I found it anyway, that Andre was awarded the Charlotte and Isidore Pajawonsky Prize in 2017, but also shortlisted very recently, 2020, for the Ernest Hemingway Foundation's annual fiction prize. I just thought I mentioned that, even though we are not into prizes, are we? Andre Bagoo's essay collection, The Undiscovered Country, was published by People Tree Press, and I think that's the collection you're going to be reading from, mainly. And as we said, Andre lives in Trinidad with his puppy Chaplin, who is somewhere there in the room. And the first section is we are going to invite Samantha Walton to read as the third writer, who is a writer, academic, and editor based in Bristol. Her poetry books are Bad Moon, which came out recently in 2020 by Spam Press, Self Heal, which came out in 2018 by Boiler House, and her fiction and poems have been published in several different places, just for example, Ambit, Granta, Gutter, Chicago Review, and etc. With Jo Walton, she co-edits the pamphlet publisher, Sad Press. Her non-fiction book, Everybody Needs Beauty, In Search of the Nature Cure, is coming out from Bloomsbury in July in 2021, and congratulations for that. So this is the first half of the reading tonight, and I'm just going to withdraw. There is not going to be introductions in between the readings. We just weave the thread from one poet to the next. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes, and to all of you for coming tonight. It's a real delight to be reading alongside these wonderful poets, many of whom I really deeply admire. So I think it's the first time I've read with Sam and Andre and Tiffany and Amy. So thank you so much for having me. I'll start with some of the earlier poems in my collection, Flesh, and a few of them are concerned with language, but also kind of the safe haven I found in the English language in particular, growing up in Hong Kong. I found a kind of nascent queerness in them, a kind of safe haven where I could explore an identity that at the time was difficult for me. So I'll start with this poem. A hurry of English. What isn't obvious because I intend to obfuscate. Oh, choose its own tail like a rabid dog. What does it say about me? This obsession written in a language I never chose. My desires dress themselves in a hurry of English to avoid my mother's gaze. How I typed Shakespeare, then homoeroticism plus Shakespeare into Google, over and over. My mother did not understand the difference between English words, so she let me be. A public history seeps into the body, the way tea leaves soak up the scent of a fridge. An odorless room is not necessarily without trauma. We must interrogate the walls. My skin is yellow because it must. Love is kind because it must. Admit it aloud. This next poem is a kind of fantastical scenario for a lot of queer children, teenagers, adults even. I think coming out is that moment when your world either kind of rebuilds itself or it just falls apart and you don't quite know which. And like many people, I didn't sort of have the perfect coming out. I think very few people do. And so I wrote my own. Conversation with Fantasy Mother. Dear Fantasy Mother, thank you for taking my coming out as calmly as a pond accepts a stone flung into its depths. You sieved my tears, added an egg, then baked a beautiful cake. You said, let us celebrate, for today you are reborn as my beloved. The candles gleamed, and the icing was almost true, impossibly white, coated with the sweetness of sprinkles. We sat together at the table and ate. Afterwards, I returned to my room and touched all the forbidden parts of myself, felt a kindness I had not known in years. A presiding presence over flesh is the poet Adrienne Rich, who really was the reason I began writing poetry in my early 20s. And so this next poem takes its title from a collection by Adrienne Rich, and the final two lines are also taken directly from her poetry. A wild patience has taken me this far. I am writing in the voice of my most hopeful self. Amnesia was my daily bread. Thank God for fan fiction, for it gets better, for poets audacious enough to mention the body. Do you know what camouflage looks like on a day-to-day basis? Checking the coast is clear before opening a single tab and multiple decoys on a screen. Surreptitiously reading Shakespeare, the scene where Cesario woos Olivia. Watching my parents' faces for a sign to hold a tidal wave back. A daily prayer for the strength to confess nothing at all times. One day, it becomes a choice to walk out of this life or to begin living mine. I left half of my language behind to escape my impeccable persona. How I wanted to perform a heroic act to gain acceptance into the kingdom of ordinary people. To love a city and to not have it love you back is its own form of torture. When I met a beautiful stranger for the first time, I was deeply afraid of her tenderness. An appointment with a therapist led to a second date. I was given permission, needed permission. She held my hand till I began to comprehend the territory of skin, its frantic heart and silent ponds. Most nights, I dream of my mother's face, by turns harsh and tender. In a nightmare, I shouted at her, neither you nor I are the enemy. What do mothers ask their own daughters everywhere in the world? Is there a question? Ask me something. So this next poem is also, I suppose, about language, but it's sort of my meditation on the fact that I've never said the word mother growing up, because obviously I said it in Chinese, in Cantonese specifically, which is my mother tongue. And I grew up in a household where we didn't speak English at all. English was the language of school and kind of the language of anything beyond the household for me. But also I've noted that actually the word mother recurs throughout the collection up to 100 times. And this is something my editor told me. He did a search for the word mother and said that it appears over 100 times in your work. which obviously is very symbolic, I think, but I've actually never said it to my mother because obviously I speak to her in Chinese. This grammatical offer of uniqueness is untrue. I have never said mother my entire life. She speaks Shanghainese and Mandarin and Cantonese, knows select phrases in French or English, words like sophisticated, multisyllabic. She would pluck them like sudden notes from a warbler's throat, her magic sleigh of hand at a dinner party where one of the guests is an elderly white man, professorial. When I say mother, I mean all those mothers I have witnessed or envisioned, mothers of history and mothers of our present historical moment, all desperately trying to love their children, even those the laws have deemed as unworthy as washcloths, tumble-dried for the last time, dirt-ridden, beyond help. And this next poem is titled Autobiography, but in the book there's a bracket around the word auto, and in fact it's in my mother's voice and not my own. Autobiography. My detractors think they know me, loud and always too soft-hearted. The time I purchased 50 pairs of frames from a sobbing woman whose eyewear shop was closing down. The day I lost my father and cried myself sick until I thought I would never sing again, though music was my only love during the revolution. The time my daughter told me she was in love with a woman, and I lied and told her it would be okay. What does 3 years of famine teach a person? Nothing, except that there is such a thing as perpetual hunger, loss pounding on the windows like rain. Except that my father loved me and that he came back as soon as he could, in the swallowtail butterfly that fluttered around the flat, in our pet papillon, in my beloved child. I think I'll read 2 more poems. This next poem is sort of influenced by Emily Berry's Stranger Baby. I found that book to be a very comforting presence as I was writing Flesh because of how it grapples with the mother-daughter relationship, albeit in a very different context. Beauty. All the metaphors have failed. The sea is infinitely breakable. My mother is raging the way waves do. Anger is a secondary emotion, a statement from my therapist who specializes in honesty, a rare trait that calms me, and she is so beautiful. I wish I could summon all the beauty in this world, ward off any jagged feelings. I cannot stand the faces of beautiful women. I feel a deep need to protect any plausible display of happiness. You see, my mother is fearful of open windows, the abiding terror of the world's light. And I'll finish with this poem. Thank you so much for listening. Wish. I would like to live like the trees. My lover often says, look up, as she admires a canopy of green. Her tree-like behavior astounds me. If you looked within me now, you'd see that my languages are like roots gnarled in soil, one and indivisible, except the world divides me endlessly. Some days I dare not look at the trees. They are such hopeful creatures. If the legislators of our world looked to their trees for guidance, would they reconsider everything? Lately, I've been trying to write a poem that might birth a tree. A genuine acceptance of the self continues to elude me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Jane. So our next reader is Andre.
Hello. Hi, everyone. As was mentioned, I am coming to you from Trinidad, where we're no longer under any lockdown, and we can actually finally go to the beach once more. So it's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much, Agnes, for that kind introduction. And it's a joy to be reading with all of these wonderful poets. And thank you, Mary Jean, for those wonderful poems. So as was mentioned, my most recent book is actually The Undiscovered Country, which is a collection of essays, which is a bit awkward to for a poet at a poetry reading. But I thought I would read a short extract from one of the essays, seeing that it involves a discussion of a poet. Aishan Hutchinson. First, he writes it all out on a yellow legal pad. The language flows, pages and pages. He works on a red wooden desk made from a repurposed door. He sits daily at this desk, up early in the mornings at 6 a.m., watching light rise over buildings in the distance. He's not in Jamaica anymore. This is Salt Lake City, Utah, a place where there is no water, no sea. Instead, he creates an ocean for himself right there on the page, his images cascading, taking orbital motion, swashing, breaking, foaming, releasing ideas as a wave throws up flotsam. He writes draft after draft, fluidly, over weeks, then types it all up, prints it all out. By the 10th iteration, he senses he might be a little closer. He cuts, 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 more cuts, themes are condensed, strands taken up, until, years after he began, he arrives at a place that matches his intuition about what this poem should be. I needed velocity, he said. Velocity that could be so rapid, as if it were mad brushstrokes on a canvas in which the narrative is only within the strokes. The story crystallized to the point where it does not stand anymore, and all that is left is the speed of it. The resulting poem tells us something about him. At nights, birds hammered my unborn, it begins. It continues over the course of 14 lines that move with the velocity of water into a stunning transformation. I smashed my head against a light bulb and light sprinkled my hair. I rejoiced, a pui, tree, hit by the sun in the room, a man, a man. This becomes the center of House of Lords and Commons, a collection that conjures, through words, the turbulence, erosion, and motion of the sea. So here in Trinidad, yesterday, in fact, we recently ended our carnival. Well, it was supposed to be carnival, but there was no carnival because of, well, we know why, because of COVID-19. But nonetheless, a lot of people had what Trinidadians call tabanca, which is like a heartache, carnival tabanca. Everyone was missing it. And I don't know, maybe I had that as well. And I recently wrote this poem. Carnival Mask. Upon your face, I find my meaning. Against the elements, your body, my standard. I am cut for you to breathe. My eyes, fearful symmetries. My paper skin long hardened, forever bent to your imperfect form, the jaws of life. The spires of my horns are effortless and proud. Heavy is the crown, heavier when discarded, dumped in dust, lost among the used up cinders, my beaten shape of ash. Yet next year you will see. You cannot leave me. Like a man scorned, I bide my time. For the mask is really all of your fear. The mask is what you do not wear. So I thought I would read some more new poems. Recently in Trinidad, we've had a serious problem with violence, particularly violence against female bodies. And just last week, there was outrage over another murder that took place, and this triggered nationwide marches and vigils. But I found myself turning back to some of the poems that I've actually written on this topic in the past, and perhaps I should read one from Pitch Lake. The body in the river. We cannot know her legendary head, only a torso left, arms, legs, Eve of Frankenstein's labor. The blue barrel floats like baby Moses, born by the Nile. It carries the Empress, naked as paper. What would Botticelli make of this? Venus, torn into dangling limbs that silence water, silence air, pitch roads silent, Cascades silent, dead museum of forensic trees. Mitan, Mitan, mon cœur, Eden. We cannot know her legendary head, crowned now by Sargasso, sea eyes that swim to heaps of pearls, great anchors, wedges of gold. We cannot know her other shores, where seaweeds make slender patterns, trails of termites in the hot house on the day her destiny becomes clear. No river is more silent than this. Pablo Escobar's Hippos. After the raid, they found them in the hacienda. 4 big bear ungulates, even-toed, porpoise-like, worthy cousins to whales, each a quatrain of wallowing. They slipped away, lost to cathedrals of night. They re-emerged sometime later, dozens of them, volcanic islands being born, basalt flecks on the water at Magdalena, steamy and slick and legion. A feral species culls what it finds. A feral plant becomes a noxious crop. Pablo Escobar, they say, has come back, and the world is one long murder. So a few years ago, many years ago, in the before times, I'm sure UK people would remember there was this question of the National Gallery, I believe, acquiring a painting called Diana and Actaeon. This poem is inspired by that. On Titian's Diana and Actaeon. August. The asphalt road to Trafalgar Square, as hot as Trinidad noon. Like the pigeons, the world flocks, a legion of specks on the steps of the National Gallery where they hang, Diana and Actaeon. Titian's scene could be the Caribbean, sky as blue as Leah's macaw, wood that could be rainforest, nude Diana and her 5 maids, like a lost carnival band. In a corner, a black woman stands, outraged, the shadow of a race's conscience. Though frozen, she whispers to all who can see, such as I am, you will be. Such as you are, I was, free. A nation spent millions on this property, but she, not Actaeon, pays the price. And the last poem that I'm going to read was written in response to art by a Trinidadian artist named Wendy Nanan. And this was recently published over at Anthropocene, that online magazine. I don't know, I think, talking in between poems and introducing poems it's kind of awkward because you don't want to talk too much about the poem. Suffice it to say, I think I should mention that in Trinidad, we have for Carnival a figure called the Jab Molassie, which is basically a kind of a mask, a devil mask, in which people cover their bodies in blue paint. Because the sky is lighter than paper, a manifesto of feathers. Blue because my wings are the bookman's pages. Blue because the island is holy, the wind high. Blue as in azure, as in cadmium, as in noise. Blue and black because kisses hurt. Blue when they saw me, they saw us. Blue the night we were walking home, Josh, you and I, and the homophobic thugs. Blue the night outside the art gallery when they chased us, unwinged. Blue like Mary's robes. Blue like the altar boy gown I wanted because it was fabulous. Blue when they threw me out of the church and I dreamt of Jesus, truly blue. And the cherub has turned blue, and the angel has turned blue, into Krishna, blue, and I saw him one day in my dreams. Blue shirt of blue school uniform, blue invisibility, blue, he touched my spine and flutes sang in me, blue, both mirror and mute. Blue the walls, the stones, the tomb, blue once, but now. Coolitude, créolité, blue, blue ontalité, negritude, bâtiment, not bâtiment. Blue for the way my heroes are dying, but blue mad for the second coming. Blue veins on every cock I ever sucked. Blue power, blue notes, the currency of blue, melodies, you, rubber orchestras, true blue blood and blue collar and blue scrubs fighting red coats, blue ink for blue manifestos of blue feathers, disobedient walls. Graffiti is blue, Jab Molassi is blue, and maybe the second coming. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Andre. That was mesmerizing. Very, very beautiful. Thank you so much. Moving on to Sam Walton.
Hi, everyone. Wow, it's a bit of a honor and a bit daunting to follow both of those amazing readings. But thank you both so much. And thank you to Aggie for inviting me. I'm going to read 3 really short poems from Self Heal to begin. And it's called Butterfly. Oh, I should check. Can everyone hear okay? Cool, thanks. Butterfly. The man at the head of the tube asks me to lift my arms, fold my shoulders back just so, or else how will I ever move on? Making a space for a body is just one of many confessions, like the best of your days is still to come, and the tube will help you see yourself properly for once, all the way through. Hurry up, chicken, it's time, he says, and I butterfly like I've been told to. A thin line of silver between us, I large-hearted carrion, he just a photographer really, or so he says. Afterwards, I lay myself out like a document. I am so not ugly, I find. I am so not undone. It only takes a moment to cut a line into yourself gently. It's a wonder everyone isn't doing it. Thanks for everything, I cry, and the tube toots. Wave, wave, goodbye. This is bone work. Granite swept, steeple lights pierce the sky's collagen lid, the badly drawn pencil line before dusk in a softly thrumming now. There's no easy way to explain how architecture withstands cannon and shot thumped into grass and leather, Civil War renegade, shortchanged, disinterred by football, swollen geographies, splintered from parish to parish, distempered beacon, shipwreck strategy is the tidal symmetry of the boneworks ablaze. And this little one was written, I was poet in residence at a genomics policy research forum years ago. And it's really hard to write poems about genomics because I just simply don't understand it as a science, but the bits I did understand were interesting. And this was a response to the control of plant time, or the attempt to control plant time, particularly in Soviet agriculture through genomic or genetic principles that were quite misunderstood. Winter code. Once you switched on your winter code, I called electricity beauty. The swabbed mystery of the connection between your body and the gross understatement of your environment made us cooperative at last, against the best judgment of science and art. Flowering in winter just once at nightfall as the cold snapped my filament and style, I passed my life trunk soma memory over to a collective hush, acquired ticks still discharging down neurons to be bathed in the living body of the collective earth, harmonic seedbed fed on jelly and black earth turned. We haven't attained light or transparency, just the competence to flower. Bedded in error, I wear my winter weeds, ears and organs sprouting madly from dumb plans and unwritten nature. So the rest of the reading I'm going to read from Bad Moon, which I want to just hold up because it's so beautiful. And thanks to Maria for designing the cover. This came out from Spam Press in October. Well, I started writing it before the pandemic situation, and I don't know, I guess I was feeling apocalyptic and scared and anxious, and in a state of some kind of emergency in relation to thinking about climate catastrophe and teaching climate catastrophe at the time. So I'm just going to read it. It's like a long sequence, and I will stop when I run out of time. They told us to watch for omens, signs in the sky, flashes of red and warning light, as if anyone could read symbols, distant explosions. They told us when it happens somewhere, someone will know. The advice to hide came late, clean as a scalpel, callous with rain and statutory pay. We took the car, drove to the cottage by the sea, the wind lashed at the brick and fingerwork, tracery of touch, cold and chemical, melancholic sweep of purple in the clouds, naked fringe of willow. First, the crisis, then the waiting, and then the silence. Through the curtains at noon, the sun is strobing like a wound. You mix tea, turn leaves with a slow steel spoon. See how the ash has fallen into star shapes, strange shapes. And then I wipe the kitchen clean with cloths, with spores, the shells of lost, cracked animals. Hum songs like there's a bad moon rising, there's a pink moon on its way. The sun, alive behind the glass, a white ball scored as with a blade. We planned to start a life, another mouth cast out, melded from our flesh, your pride, my twisting matrix of porphyry. In the weeks before, there were stories of dogs born entire, their skin slipped and watery, meaningless, you say. And so we try, my insides slipped, my everything on fire. It seems there is nothing we can't get used to, like rocks bursting into flames, the way the eyeball ruptures on the screen, wondering who suffers worst, not us, not me. The voices lost at sea and broken miles inland where the lawns are on fire and the voice of white suburbia is reduced to a high-pitched wail, its imperfect frequency. Each morning I wake and I know from the clouds that I am far too late for low and sultry dawn. I want your animal breath beside me, warm and distant. I have learnt to read the skin, the scattered rash, staining the flesh with ugly tears like seraphim. I want to lay the cards out on your flesh. It is far too late for metaphors. We will have so much time to die, so many hours to remark upon the landscape. We eat biscuit, make love in cool proximity, shout out things at random, like the fog is poisoned, the fog, curling through the lock, the pyrophoric press of it, thick in nose and throat, the heavy pass of industry, oil cleaving to the gut, scent in the deepest cell. We play a game with stones that were better used for necromancy. The game is called Fault. We must determine whose it is. I say, who killed nature? And you tell me, God. Who killed nature? Man. Who killed man? Money. And the stones say, empire, your stupid car, your systems of government, your desire to weigh your stomachs down with stones you are teeth all the way through. You want to make corrections, to say not everything, but the stones say prove it. And you try, but they make you start from the beginning every single time. When it is cool, and when we judge enough time to have passed, we slice the paper from the lock, ease the pins out of the door and step outside, breathe in the air, so rough, so chemical. Walk gently down the path, a cloud of bone and sound leading us to shore. On the stones, under dawn's red light, we find a shoal of mackerel, their silver coats puckered grey and parched, all washed up. You take a stick to split one up inside. Gross, you cry, the organ like a soup. I lay a handkerchief on top, white and knotted twice. Call them an army, you say, each shrill and unnamed soldier. Call them a knot to the untying. We can't agree on anything, but we know that dusk comes earlier each day, summer coiling into night, the way the light flows backwards, the moon a red spot on a burnt out sky. You tell me, no, you're imagining the scent of sulfur, water running up the wall. You tell me it isn't safe to listen to the songs sung by the long dead sea. We were told the lines between bodies would fade, reaching in the end, but it wasn't real to us. It wasn't at all convincing. We spent too long getting close, unself-consciously witnessing the product of ourselves. We need to make ourselves new frames, you say, meaning you want me to back off. A tall wall with cladding for yourself, a white net for me available and porous. Men used to like women to be just like water, to love them like the sea, sad, wet, and clinging to the earth. Gravity's tragic, acquiescent lubricant. Some days we do not talk at all, we just take turns as the light phases to run our fingers through the dust. The weird purr of the starlings gone, just lines of whirring sound. As if nothing is real, as if nothing is damaging. The things we can't hold on to, like how the soup man on the news told us to watch for fires taking cover in the soil. Watch for the streak of stars, like faces under glass. From the skylight, we see across the fields over grey grass and stunned white stones to where the breakers snap, to where the port wall shines like an icon. The white hole of the night, the dead regimes of water. Do you think of me? I ask. The vanishing point is trending without romance. Streak of light on surf, a coiled white finger held stupidly aloft. Each day, itchier, tiresome, and more frayed, leaning out at furthest reach, you scream at the eclipse, spitting your thin white mucus into the carnal cosmos. I stop my ears until the door slams, and when I know that you are gone, I place 3 stones into my mouth. Wait for the words to form. The ribbed edge of my gums, my tongue pressed and burning. I start ceremony, but end shy, much too soon. When did everything go wrong? Is it possible to place? If you want to own something, give it a name. We thought we would be safe. Me, mistress of the larder, you cutting the turf of me. The slow drip slip of body from itself, heart from its mouth, the slow fish eye guilt of it. We need new stories, you used to say, to re-enchant our world. Instead, the floods came, wheels raised in floodplains, sung to the tune of the empty bones of endlings, filling with microfibers. We need new songs, but we are left with oil, the wild sheen of electronics, scratch of blood beneath the skin marking lunar passage, the stories we told about the body, the uncalled for weight of it, the way we used to take photographs of the moon and call her a slut. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sam. So just completely like random question. You finished a self-heal in 2018 and managed to put together the book within 2 years. How did that happen? I just want to know how that works for you with, I know you being an incredibly busy academic as well.
I don't know, because I waste a lot of time and I like to drink. I'll get back to you on that one.
Anyway, absolutely lovely to hear, and because I know self-heal, we have it for the undergraduates. Read some essays written in it the two books are incredibly different as well. So lovely to hear the new work. Absolutely beautiful. And thank you also to Mary Jane Chan and Andre Bagoo for the mesmerizing and beautiful readings as well. So I'm just reading some private messages sent to me. It sounds like people would like to have a 5-minute break instead of a 2-minute break. So we'll come back at, shall we say, we'll start gathering at 3 minutes past, and we'll kick off with Amy at 5 past. I'm not going to switch off the camera, and sorry, I'm not gonna switch off the video, so you don't have to leave the room. Because I don't know how it works. I might have to start, like you might have to start re-entering. So best if you just leave it as it is, if you are planning to stay for the second half. Thank you so much. Wonderful. See you soon. We just said, sorry, I just wanted to say that Adam suggested that people in the break, if you don't need a break, you can just hang out with one another and have a quick chat and catch up, especially if you haven't seen us for a while and you want. Okay, I am assuming that everybody is back. So Amy and Tiff, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to introduce very briefly our two poets in the second half. And again, there won't be any pauses or introductions between the two readings. So really pleased to say that I've tried to track you down, Amy, for the past 2 years, and eventually I've managed, which is brilliant, even if it's under virtual circumstances, but lovely to see you again. I think last time it was Brighton, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a Brighton reading quite a while ago now. So the final two readers is Amy D.F. and Tiffany Atkinson. So I'm going to introduce Amy first, who has published a number of chapbooks, including On My Love for Gender Abolition by Capricious, and Lower Parallel by Bark Press. Amy is working on a critical book currently, Unsociable, Antagonism and Abstraction in Contemporary Feminized Poetry, and with Nat Hurley and Sean O'Brien also on a collaborative project toward antisocial reproduction. Amy Diaz is works as a lecturer in contemporary literature, culture and theory at King's College, London. Tiffany Atkinson, the final reader. Again, a huge welcome to Tiffany. Is the author of 4 poetry collections, Kink and Particle, that came out in 2016 by Saron, which was a Poetry Book Society recommendation. It won a Poetry Book Society recommendation and also was the winner of the Jerwood Arborough First Collection Prize. Then Katula et al., that was a 2011 publication by Poetics. It also won a TLS Book of the Year award, Times Literary Supplement Award. and was also shortlisted for the Wales Book of the Year. That was a 2014, again, Poetics publication. And it also gained a PBS Society recommendation and was the winner of the Roland Matthias Poetry Prize. And a well-awaited or anticipated, or whatever the word is, final collection, or this recent collection, Lumen, that I think is literally just come out right like now in the last month or so. So also a Poetics collection, which already has got the a PBS recommendation. We could kind of conceitedly say that this is a Sheffield launch of the book, if that's okay. Tiffany is working currently on another book about poetry, ethics, and embarrassment, and lives in Norwich. Also is a Lever Humour Research Fellow and the Professor of Creative Writing Poetry at the University of East Anglia, UEA. So really big warm welcome to both of you. Let's just dive into the readings now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. And thank you so much for organising this as well. It's really great to hear all the poets who have read so far, Mary Jean, Andre and Sam. It's just fantastic to hear your work, which I haven't heard in some time. I've never heard Andre's work before, actually, so that was just wonderful. Yeah, I have a few chapbooks, but I'm actually putting a book together for a full book together for the first time. I think I might win the prize for the slowest poet ever. And also thank you for inviting me back again too, Aggie. I couldn't make the invite that Aggie previously extended to me, but she tried again and I'm very grateful. Okay, I'm going to read some sonnets, partly inspired by Bernadette Mayer, who is reading on Friday, by the way, with Fred Spoliar and Colin Hurd. I think there are still tickets available for that, so that's happening 5 o'clock, 5:30 Friday. Still copies for sale, tickets for sale, 5 p.m. Yes, Maria's put it in the chat there. Okay, so here's a sonnet inspired by Bernadette. I had a dream that you knitted me a scarf, hat, and also that you made me a pair of trousers. Why the rigid mortification made of stone but still walking? Can we do this without romanticizing anybody? Can anyone who can see the wood for the trees escape a sensation of sovereignty? So much work to take writing seriously. Who is my friend and who's my lover? There must be some confusion. I'm walking in those concrete trousers, but I'm taking this to the top, to the senior vice chancellor, pro VC, president and principal, and then higher to the order of St. Cassia, who's fortunately dead like the Lamb of God and therefore supreme. And another one. Oh, Cassandra, I had a dream that we were together again, a previous life fluttering into my heart like books through the window, and with titles like Suffolk Miscellany, The Forager's Calendar, and Queer Saint. Who can blame me? Sunshine, in the words of the survivor, worrying always about theorizing, never living as we imagine our transformations fleshily, combining of inventories, taxonomies, catalogues, and registers, hearing instead of music the words of the complainant, who this time IDs as a butthurt feudal lord. I wish merely to be someone like Brecht or Joan Didion or any New York school painter, or maybe sensuousness, which inexplicably people still love. That's a cheap shot, I know, but I did wash your dish. I, accident eyelid. I had a dream that we did transform, that, Lord, I can change as a commodity waiting to appear, and in the meantime getting laid in an accountable way. I should have been accountable in the Empire Diner in Ionia in the 6th century BC, which is where my domestic troubles began. I said my DNA is not self-reproducing. He said that's my money walking home to a happy future, and it's a money I remember the taste of. It seems familiar, I think to myself, and then I think, and then I remember it's my money, but look around. there is no money walking me home. I do not remember the taste of you. I forgot to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's all accountable, we say, but it can't be explained, except when you want to own it. If I could remember it all, I'd remember again. Who can't write a sonnet made of Bernadette fuck sonnets? I had a dream we were both on fire and drowning in an envelope of Nightings Outley, but no, look at the full moon accelerating. I'm lost remembering an Alan Davies poem about cocks, cunts, and a line drawing of a woman making a bed, a masterminded cunt who said, come save me up, you can have me, she said, steampunk rising from the sheets. You mist of 2020 fuck, you petty pendergrass, you deistic whore, left only to emulate love's obsidian eyes to waltz thy sheets, given it to be gone and to give room, given it to be gone and to give room, to given it room. Transferable skull. Sorry about that title. When you're walking on a stage, the affirmation of a union, should living offend the dead, or should I avenge thee? When you're walking on a star, manage not to get pregnant. I lied, I don't know who you are, or how to hear that differently. If Tyburn limns the vines of this great moving right show to keep up the payments generationally, but I feel differently and it does offend me. Suboptimal what? I dreamt I came from around here, buttercup, tall glass reproducing, nothing I'm proud of, a right-wing policy think tank, a lilac banner, nothing I could forget not well, like acclimatizing to Soylent Green or AC Grayling. Is it true that the people or the public said that? When inverting the arc of history, do nothing that you do not well and wear it. All I would keep for myself, having become the result of a process and having produced results myself. It is right that cortisol is a turnkey operation, and that although these phenomena are not entirely new, acclimatizing to the recommendations of think tanks around here means don't come around here. They're the same loam. If a small increment would make you happier, bro, then I am your cab driver. Knock yourself out. You are policy exchange, a flagrant impersonation of a homing pigeon, but this illusionist ambivalence is the fool you feel yourself to be, and thus to have a temperament, to achieve buy-in, to love oneself, to have a self, to have a sense of self. I'm willing to believe when all this is said and done, that 3/4 of people who say they have a dead life lived, but it's you I confide in the most when I have a temperature too shrill for the baby that's coming to nest on my knee. My father lies peacefully here. This application has no ideas intrinsic to itself. I might die on that hill, convoked to a state of excitement by something much larger than me. And this is a final sonnet, I think. A sonnet beginning with a line from George Economou's Piers Plowman. For this good God, grant me forgiveness for my worthless living during my entire lifetime. I couldn't be less inventive if I tried. What is the trajectory of the virus now? Eludes me like a task I still must do, to exit this concept, real and imagined, by absconding piss babies, unwise grandpas slapped then flung laterally on the eyes, nose and mouth. On this day of nationalist fervour, I be not mercy flying through the trees, dioramas of thinning spirals that slide on water and then return back to us panting and plumper than before, a force of nature splayed there where, scientifically, I cannot be mercy. Okay, and this is a series of short, another series of connected poems. It's a work very much in progress. I asked friends if they had email exchanges or correspondences that they'd be willing to share with me, in which they'd either attempted to negotiate better working conditions or arrangements, or had a kind of awkward exchange with a colleague or a line manager, or alternatively, reluctantly agreed to take something on
when asked by, you know, another colleague or a line manager. And I'm imagining that this could turn into some kind of absurd elegy, maybe. Many of them, as you might guess, relate to academia, but not all of them. I have some friends outside of academia who shared stories with me too, and my dad as well, who worked for this cursed music distribution company for most of his life. So there's one for him too. And these are dedicated to the friends and family who shared their sorry tales and emails with me. Dear Helen, I welcome the idea we were planning to hold, to consider a vote to welcome our ideas. Fish sauce or fresh snow, it's a Neil kind of sky. Hawthornaged critique in the weekly Piette. Wet signatures ought to have babies no more in order to manage whatever we agreed. Whatever desire I bequeath you, any outcome regardless of the means. We do have some hands, but they're cable tied to a letter chiselled the 12th of September. Tied, I think, possibly, but I don't think I'm getting back to me so speedily. Blazed and spitballing, referred to the labour of conquest, referred in turn to technology enhanced learning. Yours in a model, Helen. Dear Josh, yours was the word, mine was the deed. Where, as a matter of record and contrary to what you've said, a convention of literally anyone could, shitson, actually forward these messages beyond the grave and right up to the wire, where a vacant fried woodpecker would, Simpson style, fly down, down, down to a glowering furnace, causing the pavements to heave and causing you and I to suddenly retch. Josh, you come from a long line of VLE artisans now stranded in the dust, made virginal again by your own proclivity for whatever is not laborious, time-consuming, tedious and banal. Our unfettered and unchallenged champion condensed into the most perfect reply ever. Yours in a pickle, Josh. Hi, Andy. I was told via email on the 3rd that I could have saw a belt of gold, yet nobody alerted me to this. No one shook me from my swivelling long enough to make me see I was a sitting duck, a turd unimpacted enough to awake the temperature of an age in which I am still willing to make myself doable, by which I mean teabagging best practices to wrap my needs around my head. Now that work that improves one is hard to come by. But don't get me wrong, they're your particular chops and your specific taters. All best, Andy. Hello, everyone. Thanks for your help so far, and apologies for mooning you from the window the other day. I was overcome with class ressentiment, you little ducklings greased so sweetly in the imaging, the neat pastoral scene of white helmet phyllo pastry, the doppelganger Kenny Rogers at the local fair, a live author, a dead author, an author with an agent. I imagined myself reconstructing this pageant. If you want all people who have ever worked on a gift, micromanaging a shallow trough of short shrift. No, you're a Canadianist, I yelled in a basement. So I am writing to ask if you would give me a gift. Would you be able to do so ASAP? If you could make it a priority, that would be great. Thanks. Cheers, E. Dear Father Christmas, colleagues were asked behind my back to judge my suitability for the job. The word flies out of the sticks as sure as I scrambled for extra work. A week later, the dean came to my office. If I apply for promotion, I will, i.e. will not be perceived as mad, nor on the threshold of what it's possible to love on. The proposed reduction in my hours is a reduction of my love. I sought further work. Narcissism, overconfidence, or actual sociopathy, some way to say that I'd been cleared, fixed in the cranium like a wedge, since the being of the spirit is in the bones, or the mind and or spirit is a bone. Anyway, within a year, I had quit. Then she hugged me. Love, FC. Dear Dave, Music Sales Limited began as a wholesaler and distributor of sheet music, redesigning and reprinting existing scores. Get her off the desk, too ugly. Dealing on the side in low-cost instruments for kids and the retired, small guitars, recorders, and Irish baram. Things he didn't like but had to be done. You had to hide them so he wouldn't find them, like Dave from EMI. When CDs came along, they could be packaged along with penny whistles and sold. As in flexible contracting, you have the option to sign a new contract or leave, play crib, take inlays out of CDs. A long succession of division managers. Some were sociopaths, some were simply incompetent. Regards, Dave. Okay, that's the end of those for now. This last poem I'll read is called Force of Nature. It's a good night to stay home and work a delivery tread on the yeast farm, then pour oneself into a plaster of Paris model of our own activities. It's a fine night to entertain, neo-feudalism for indolent boomers, birds in their little nest hanging on the edge of earth as it is in heaven. But more than that, aside heaven and hell, the quickness deepening a family of dead flies and a bee, storm clouds lit up from the inside, angel hair anthology inscribed outwards to me, the two formalities walking out to dinner, fluoride and cestius, discourse and reason, Samantha at the World's Fair with her stupid husband, godly flourishing. God, I don't care. I want what you just had. You army of people, you logistical shadow. You want it, but you can't need it. You love it, but could never conceive it to do your job or to provide the material equipment to cancel a city to bring you back to my feet. If life slips easily, then why are you so brittle? Lording it over me like a natural dude science outdated, struck for embezzlement, forgery, crooked stock jobbing, quick to go blue. I know of you. I look at this and just think, it's not about NAFTA. First there was piecework, then there was wage labour. We should not allow this, then we should bury them. At this point in the story, the inverted world itself, and there was piecework again, imagination and virtuosity, liveness and death, a flashing Ferris wheel catching and throwing us off, once as predictive policing, second as unconscious bias training, land in Saskatchewan, land in Delhi, as if the earth existed twice, a prism through the hook of a Lucretian swerve, a pretty plainer fold of power folded in upon itself and everything else sublime about you and that you want from women and gays. I don't speak for women, but I am compelled to act as one and make a concept out of it. I am both cottagecore and hope you're keeping safe. Resilience, discourse, and electable bunny boiler, crimped where the stars fell into themselves, a wildfire here, a cup of stevia there, a turgid cat in a car park I picked up by Morrison's, with a feeling of deja vu for things and their uses I may not divine. Social mobility to what? A mysterious union comes catachristically to me, says what it is and why I am, but I am no longer what I was then and now. I thought the job would be forever, my hang glider to the soul. I look upon myself. The bar slides down the screen. You look over. The first declension, a downturn ladder to a depth I don't know anymore. Is it you or me cooler now here than it is in there? All wage theft is theft, all proles can be thievers, so we're forms akin to ourselves, no longer recognisable, and nothingness to act on as our activities act on us, catching in antimony creased ideas beneath the skin, a beautiful garden, the 1960s, a handsome river, the 1970s, a sweet dusky June, the 1980s, a proper fleecing, the 1990s, city of atomic light, this casual gesture, hot body heat, these pleated hills, a fold of skin, quadruple freedom, a deep green pool of sleep. Behold me, I'm you now. So that's the end. Thank you for listening. I need to take a deep breath now and have a glass of wine.
Absolutely mind-blowing. Thank you. It was worth waiting for your reading. So amazing new work. So I just looking at the messages on the margin. People are asking when it's out. The new work?
I don't have a publisher yet. It's called a manuscript. It's a file called manuscript. So I keep talking about it in the hope that I will actually get it done. Academia has prevented me a bit, I suppose. But yeah, if anyone's got recommendations, let me know.
Okay. I might, but we'll talk about it later. Thank you so much. Amazing stuff. So our final reader today, we've been also waiting for a while to read for us, is Tiffany Atkinson, and hoping that we're gonna hear a bit of from Lumen, the latest collection. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, thanks, Aggie, and thank you so much for inviting me. And God, it's such an honour to read with and to listen to Mary Jean and Andre and Samantha and Amy, all poets who I admire very much. And I've just discovered the good thing about this system, doing things online, is that when you're muted, you can make those little squeaks of anxiety and no one knows. So I've sort of been sitting here going, yeah, and yeah, that's great. No one knew until now. So yeah, I thank you. This also happens to be a launch of Lumen, which has just come out. So yeah, I'll read a few poems from this. Lumen opens with a sequence called Dolorimeter, which is based on an experience of a hospital residency where I was just given reasonably free rein. It wasn't in ICU or anything like that, but talking to patients and staff in the hospital. And the term dolorimeter, as you may know, is a hypothetical pain measuring device, which caught my imagination. So the little opening poem is called Dolorimeter. A dolorimeter is an instrument used to measure pain, threshold, and tolerance. Dolorimetry has been defined as the measurement of pain sensitivity or pain intensity, see inter alia, reliability. We might also call it language. The term lumen, I'm sure everyone knows it's a unit of light, but it also has a kind of a medical application, which I didn't know until I heard a nurse use it. This poem is about finding that out, actually. And the nurse I used to follow around was called Pinky, and she was absolutely tiny. She was an incredibly slight woman, but she was so strong. She really was. She could lift people up with single-handed. Clean windows. Sean, the new department manager, spends all the petty cash on window cleaners for these huge panes 6 floors up. They all have their foibles, says Pinky, shucking a glove with a smack. We're in the main ward, high and formal as an Oxbridge hall. A trolley turns a corner somewhere deep, and then, as if the hospital swings downwind and hangs on its anchor, calm, rolls up the jinxy stairwells to this floor, where, through the hand-rinsed glass, we watch a white van climb out of the valley to the new world. What's a word for how the light, this cold May afternoon, ruffles the blue pleated curtain behind Mr. Mooney, reaching for his tumbler like a man underwater? I have lumen biroed on my hand because the nurse who used it scuttled off before I got to ask. What's a lumen, Pinky? Just an opening, she says. A lot of the time I was there, I was just listening to people tell me stories, and this is pretty much what I could remember afterwards of basically a monologue from a Welsh farmer, a hill farmer, a really tough man who just had surgery of some sort and was telling me about it. And I gradually realized that what he was describing was some kind of hallucination or trip brought on by presumably his medication. I hope so, anyway. And it kind of fell quite naturally into a Sapphic stanza. So I just left it like that. He was called Mr. Broad, and he was, and it's called Mr. Broad's Morphine. When it all got bad, I couldn't see an end to it. I couldn't see how it would work out. Am I going to die? I said. The nurse didn't bat an eyelid. Then they were wheeling me to theatre, bumping down the old farm track. I knew each rut, and there was the farmer sat on the bed with the sheep and the dog. The dog was on the floor, and he wanted to sell me the dog. This is what we were worried about. So we talked it all the way through. And when I got back to the ward, I said, Kathy, turn off the fan. It smells of, poo. It smells of shit. But the smell got worse. It was thick, like a bandage. I couldn't believe how anyone could walk around in that. Kathy, I said, and looked down into the valley where there was a music festival. I could see the lights, the dancing, and was terrified because they didn't know about the poo, the shit, and I was waving, standing on the bed and shouting out. Then it did. It came, exploding through the valley in a thick wave, dreadful, awful, and they didn't care. They were playing in it, swimming and so forth, chucking it around, breathing it in. Yes, he mowed. It was the most dreadful, the worst. Look, I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes, just trying to tell you. But the nurses, they can make your life a misery and it won't even, be visible, or they can save your life. It's a relationship. And if you're some grumpy old scrote, well, I tried to keep my manners even when, but you don't want to hear this. Let me try again. That was the worst part. God help me, love. No verse can come of that. While I was there were these really quiet times where I was just reading through all this ancient kind of medical literature in people's bookshelves in various offices. And there was one where I came across a mnemonic called Socrates. And I don't know if this has ever been used, and it's got nothing to do with the philosopher, but it was simply a way of remembering a checklist for asking questions about pain, that how to identify pain. So S for sight, O for onset, C for character, and so forth. So I kind of wanted to overlay that with that structure with fragments of perhaps more associative things that I picked up from people who spoke about their experiences. And indeed from some of mine, they started to kind of find their way in. Socrates. Sight. Where is the pain? In the violet corners, under my tongue, at the root of language, at the bottom of my red bag, ringing all hours. Jesus, how can you ask that? Here, here, here. Onset. When did the pain start? I've thought about this a good while. My wife says round about the time we got back from Corfu, but I kept quiet for the first 4 billion years. Character. What is the pain like? Drama queen, bad dad, alien, vicious wee shite slinking up to the house with my fucking keys in its hand. Radiation. Does the pain radiate? But I'm flashing like a cursor, nail bomb, permanent terrorist broadcast from the bottom of the sea. Associations. Any signs or symptoms associated with it? Mother comes down to the garden in her headscarf with a handful of tubers. Go get your bucket and spade, my mouse, and help me dig them in. Time course. Does it follow any pattern? See history. See also structure of the novel post-war. Exacerbating, relieving factors. Does anything change it? It is not an economy, marriage, weather system, tight shoe, or an untuned radio, but sometimes I watch as it turns on itself like a prom queen no one's watching. Severity. How bad is the pain? Let's take everything that's not the pain. Let's gather that and hang it out in daylight, can we? From the dark nail. And the last sort of medical poem is one that happened after that, where my ex-partner, became suddenly gravely ill in Paris, and I had to get there quickly on the Eurostar. And it was a very hot day, I remember that. And also it was one of the periods where the police were trying to clear the migrant and refugee camps at Calais. So there were these standoffs and the trains were slowed down because of that. Right. The heart, it's true, looks jaunty. How he'd sketched it, on our hospital invoice left face down for 3 days in its own red tape. And language being so, says Dr. Sashala, while inking in the dead star of the emboli and firing biro arrows hard into your heart's high halls. Voila, obstruction, l'endommage. Here's someone's fast train, stalled in freakish heat, and gendarme pushing back, the clamour at the tunnel mouth, boys on the tracks, with lives tamped down in rucksacks, also each his own 5 quarts of blood. Past tarp and chain link to the inmost districts of the heart. A woman fastens shutters on the dark and calls your smallest name. Of course, you have no clothes or shoes. The heart, meanwhile, hears everything. Of course it storms its railings. Shh, says the oxygen pump to all its citizens. Since Amy read some poems about work and workplaces, which is such a brilliant subject, such an underused subject, I think, I thought I've taken courage. I'm going to read a couple about things that I hope a lot of this audience will recognise to do with working in universities perhaps, but also applications for grants and Arts Council and all of that hoo-ha. This is called Department of Small Arts, and it was a slip of the tongue in a meeting where someone said, oh, we should all be applying to the Department of Small Arts. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'd quite like to be part of the Department of Small Arts. You know, I like the minor and the marginal and the peripheral. So the Department of Small Arts invites you to diminish applications. You may work in any medium, but are likely to prefer edges and the undergold. For example, you may listen for the blackbird. You may have at least one unresponsive parent. You may be among the peaceniks and the women. You may drive despite the terror. You may compliment the cashier's fishtail braids. You may spot the feathers at the roadside. You may rearrange the toys in party huddles. You may give the man your loose change. You may leave before the hostess is in tears. Should you entertain a huge idea, please delegate. We have no truck. Do load your sling with quanta. We remind you that the grant season blinks twice a year. Consider what has passed through. Annotation, milk and soft parentheses, a cardboard plinth, all secret names, bespoke and little lids that pop up with a puck, a strong historic present, slow and slow and slow and wait, let's. And this is about, recently I've been invited to take part in interview panels, which is really weird. It's like some kind of threshold you cross, and it never, well, in my experience, you never feel like you're on the wrong side of it, on the right side of it, sorry. Panels. Somehow, I have crossed the gleaming table and am on the panels. What do they think I know? We have worked on the disposition of chairs, but even so, there is a scythe of us. A glass of water trembles at the centre. I have sampled its freshness, for such is my power. I've drawn down the blinds. I am asking the difficult question. Each jewel swivels brightly in the hot seat. Tell us. More specifically, can you give us an example? For example, could you tell us, and in what ways, how precisely you can excellently both withstand and dazzle? Thank you. Viewed from space, we are impartial as a cyclone or a great wall. Please take all the time you need. Oh, diffidence, oh, fluster, oh, the 5-point plan, Oh, impenetrable young men, you may now retire and pace the afternoon while we're apportioning the good cuts. As from confession, one may leave these blinded rooms embarrassingly close to tears, but we made the day's work's weird vow to try always, almost, to accomplish some right thing. Let's read two more poems. One is a more recent one. Excuse me. Good. To go on a date is to make of the body a system of dark wedges. It is freshly terrible to have a face, the way, like mirrors, they flash data back and forth while you stand steadily between. Hence, red wine in a beefy glass, as if you weren't holding your own skin at arm's length. Small talk's flimsy prism of adjacencies. To laugh or not, your family say you have the army laugh, and so you do, an ambush. Dinner, then. The application of a mild soup and a fish that parts like all virginities. Oh, tableware, what giddy beacons and the beddy freshness of the white cloth. It is in its own way a disturbance. He is leaning into shimmer and has said, not one thing you can prick a phrase through, never mind. At this age, it could be a holy rage to fire oneself directly into sex as any man might. Unaccountably, you think of other structural necessities, e.g., the Afghan rug your mother had, whose central lozenge pulled from jagged red a green so contrary you'd blink until the colour bounced back at the emptied eye, only more utterly original. Such vertigo and tilted joy, how chocks of self fall open and some central filament burns up perversely all that decorous pale oxygen of good. And I'm going to finish with a slightly silly poem from a couple of years ago when I was helping a neighbour's teenage daughter with some GCSE work about film and feminism, and we were kind of exploring all the cliches, I suppose, of films, of ways of dealing with Hollywood films' approach to women. And I think since then, this poem may well have become redundant. So I think I might read it once tonight and then retire it. And I hope it's become redundant for all the best reasons. 21 points for a feminist essay on film. 1. Something small to say, and mostly us to say it. 2. We gather dessert spoons in sticky bouquets. 3. We hear disturbance in the basement, and still we take a candle and go down. 4. We're innocent, if only to ourselves, and want to know the strangeness of our houses. 5. No one breathes until the hemlines go up. 6. Off with our glasses and, oh my, we are delivered to ourselves like roses. 7. It's the softness of our bodies. 8. It's all of us laid end to end in a Mobius strip of skin and celluloid that kicks the whole shebang off. 9. We know when to run by the state of our shoes. 10. If everyone's shoes are sweet, we stay. 11. We may come like someone's pulled a ripcord from our bellies and go, yes. Or 12. A lawyer enters, e.g., did we say no in the way Plato himself would say no? 13. Here's our archive of equivocal sounds. 14. The original problem, of course, is mother. 15. or the workplace, 16. Anyway, to do with mothers or employment will be why some guys still creeping up our shady stair like black mold, 17. He'll call it retribution and they'll count this, 18. So we work real hard to be good astronauts and cyborgs, lining up our gleaming corsetry across the world's bridge, 19. Sister, warrior, this hypothesis will oust us from the family, 20. Never mind, it's only true in movies. 21. Will someone press the little button? Thank you.
Wow, amazing. So, thank you so much, Tiffany. That was absolutely lovely to hear your new work as well as earlier work, and also to have you at last to read for us. I'm going to take this off because I can't decide whether it's working or not, my new glasses. I'm just going to very briefly round up the reading with, again, individual thank yous to the four poets, Andre Bagoo, Mary Jane Chan, Sam Walton, Amy Diaz, and Tiffany Atkinson. Really beautiful readings, and also what a lovely way for us to kick off the academic year, but also kick off 2021. A huge thank you to all of you and all those who've come tonight. Talking of Tiff's astronauts, the flyer for the Center for Poetry and Poetics spring schedule is somehow chiming in well with your astronauts as well, Tiffany. So very quickly, just to say that you can find how the schedule for spring on our very basic Tumblr website, Center for Poetry and Poetics. If you just Google that, Sheffield, it will come up with the relevant flyers, or you'll hear from us via Facebook or various informal